Hey guys, how's it going? I wanted to talk to everybody a little bit about, let's say, a precision rifle setup, particularly on a bolt gun. This is a Savage Axis 2, a very cheap but accurate rifle. I put together a project about a year and a half ago, posted on some local forums. The title of my project was 1,000 yards for $1,000. It seems to be a kind of rifle setup that a lot of people are interested in, especially those who aren't sure if they want to commit to getting into the long range game because it's a really expensive one, but maybe they just want to see if they're interested in it. In kind of the worst case scenario, if you put together $1,000 rifle, you got yourself like a nice beater deer rifle as well. So that was kind of my logic for it. I went ahead and said to myself, okay, if I like this, I might invest in a more expensive rifle. So this is the parts that I've kind of put together. But I also want to tell you what I would have done differently now that I kind of know a lot more. So my experience with long distance shooting is basically nothing, or at least it was before I put this rifle together. I'm actually wearing, hilariously enough, my NRA Whittington Center t-shirt today. This is the shirt that you can buy if you shoot the buffalo at like 1,250 yards or whatever it is up there at that range in New Mexico and Raton. So before that trip, it was about 6 months before, I knew I wanted to try and do it. I didn't have a bolt gun that was even remotely worthy of even trying, and a caliber that I thought would be worthy of using. And so I went ahead and I did some research, and I came to the conclusion that if I wanted to do a target rifle, keep it easy, make it not too expensive, I'd stick with a 6.5 Creedmoor. There's plenty of ammo availability out there. The ballistic coefficient of a 6.5 Creedmoor is significantly improved over a 308, and like the way that I kind of look at 6.5 is it's a little bit better of a 308 for a lot of uses, especially target shooting. I think the 308 technically impacts more energy, but not enough of a degree to where you wouldn't feel comfortable hunting like whitetail or anything with the 6.5. Significantly less recoil and a way flatter shooting around with less time in the air, which means that it is blown around by the wind, less than a 308. So I went with a 6.5 Creedmoor. Like I said before, this is the Savage Axis 2. I was kind of trying to decide between this and a Ruger American. I ended up going with the Savage because they seem to have a better pedigree for barrel accuracy, and that's splitting hairs. I know that the Ruger Americans are really accurate for a discounted rifle, but the final decision for me was the trigger. I think they call it the AccuTrigger, AccuTech or something. It's a really decent trigger for out of the box, especially on a cheap rifle. So I went ahead and bought the rifle, and being a novice at the time, I didn't realize a whole lot about dope. And so for those of you who don't know what dope is data on previous engagement. It's an acronym used by the military. It is a term that we all use when it comes to just understanding what your dials for your elevation or windage are going to be on your turrets. And dope implies with the previous engagement part that you've gone out there and you shot it, and you've actually predicted and written down and gotten that data for what your dials are going to be at said distances. Usually you like to write them down and keep them somewhere. Some guys like to keep them on their stock or inside a scope flip cap. That stuff's all great. I haven't done it with this rifle just because I have a dope card in here. But anyway, so that's what this rifle is. It's a Savage Axis. I didn't realize that these were not really set up super well for anything other than hunting, so I had to add a 25 MOA rail on this here. I think I paid like 30 bucks for it. It's just a worn mount. And then I got some lower scope rings from Vortex, and this is a Vortex Diamondback 4-16. In retrospect, maybe I should have gotten a Vortex Viper because the glass in here is only good enough to kind of get the work done. It's not particularly good. It's still Chinesium. Like, I wouldn't want to put any glass of this quality on a fighting rifle I'm going to depend my life on. But I have been able to reach out with this glass, with this rifle, the setup it is, out to a mile before, which again is not really great for 6.5 Creedmoor, but with a little bit of luck and me doing my part, I can hit at a mile like 1 out of every 5 shots. But I can shoot, more importantly, at 12 to 1,300 yards pretty much at a man-sized target, I can hit that target with this rifle, I would say 80% of the time, 4 out of 5 rounds, unless there's some crazy wind gust that I don't account for or I pull my shot. So rifle's really capable. It has a pencil profile hunting barrel, which I didn't even realize before I got into the suppressor game how important barrel profile would be. This is really too thin to be threading a suppressor on it. I have ran a suppressor on this rifle. It is terrible. It opens my groups up like crazy because it causes barrel droop and increases the heat on the barrel. And because it's so thin, it's more reactive to heat. So I shoot this gun 99% of the time without a suppressor on it. So if I could go back, I would have gotten a heavier profile barrel that resists that heat soak a little bit better. So that's something to keep in mind. It does have a Harris bipod on it. It works fine. I'm not a bipod Nazi. I just get what works for you. If you're not using it for duty, you can use a cheaper bipod that'll work okay. If you're going to compete with a rifle, I'd spend the money on at least a Harris. Probably an Atlas or something would be better. It has more features, but you're going to pay for it. I do think they're way overpriced, but $100, $110 for this bipod has gotten me exactly where I need to go. I have some Magpul bipods that I do not like. They're lightweight, which is nice, but they're nothing, from rigidity point of view, they're nothing nearly as rigid as this. And I prefer the way this functions too. It just seems to be a little more durable. None of my bipods have broken, but I just like the steel and the aluminum. It's spring loaded. Magpuls are not. They just seem flimsier. I'm sure they're not going to break, but it's perception. If I'm spending almost the same amount on a polymer bipod, I'd rather have this, right? So that was my logic there. Done nothing to the bolt other than just kind of polish it a little bit. Trigger, I just lowered it to 2.5 pounds on the pull, which some guys would say is too heavy for precision rifle. It's not. It's fine. I really don't want anything lighter than this for hunting either, because if you get buck fever, I'd imagine if you've got a human being in your crosshairs too, if God forbid you had to use it, you'd probably be antsy, I would assume, and I want enough weight on the pull to know when I'm breaking that shot. 2.5 pounds is fine for me. The stock that comes on the rifle is terrible, but it doesn't mean it doesn't work. So it is technically free floated. I'm sure there's some contact in here with the barrel. Maybe it's not as free floated as they say it is. So a chassis upgrade on a rifle like this would probably do wonders. But the reality is, if I can group it 0.6 inches and 100 yards with this dang thing, and I've got $1,000 into it, I don't want to really polish a turd, right? As the old saying goes, I don't want to sink more money into something that is just doing exactly what I asked it to do. And the idea is to keep it cheap so I can learn. So that's where we are in this rifle. The biggest issue this rifle has, and I've seen it with a lot of bolt guns, and particularly with Savage cheap guns, is the action and the feeding. So it's got a box magazine. I think it holds 4 rounds of 6.5 Creedmoor. It will not cycle more than one. So usually I do a single round of 6.5 Creedmoor in there. I just stack on top of the magazine and lock the action close and shoot one at a time. If I need to do a follow-up shot, I'll have one in the magazine, one in the chamber. Every time I have more than that in there, it seems to really cause some issues with feeding. I'm very particular about how I run the bolt. I've got 800 rounds through this thing, so it's not like I'm uncomfortable with it or trying to figure it out. I have figured it out. It shoots terribly from an action and reliability point of view. And sometimes I do have light primer strikes. But again, for hunting and for learning and for shooting out to distances that I thought weren't even possible for the amateur, this gun has gotten that work done. So what would I do differently? Now, knowing what I do know, and you got to remember, I didn't know diddly about shooting long distance before. I just heard the FUD lore, right, about how 500-yard shots are so hard to make and blah, 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 blah. And I realized they're not hard to make. If you have the equipment that is capable of doing it, scopes now and cartridges are so freaking accurate, even with cheap guns. They're you should be able to go get a cheap gun and go do it. Now, I spent about $1,000 to $1,100 on this gun because I had to have the barrel threaded and had to add the mount and do things like that. So it was a little over $1,000. But the reality is, I think I would have probably, if I could do it again, I would go back and get a Bergara B14 HMR that has a superior barrel, superior bolt, superior stock by a country mile, way better stock. and just all around a more premium rifle. You can find those in 6.5 Creedmoor like $900 on gun.deals. I've seen them out there. Again, I didn't know to look back then. And I probably, if I wanted to stay budget, I wouldn't have gone with the 4x16 glass from Vortex, their cheap stuff. I probably would have gone with an Arken EP5, which is still budget minded. It's got Japanese glass. It is made in China. So again, not a premium brand, but you can get that scope with the rings and everything after a discount code from Texas Plinking for like $500, I think, maybe 400 after the discount code. And that's a decent fit for like an affordable out-of-the-box rifle like a Bergara B14. Potentially could look at a Vortex Viper scope as well if I wanted to spend $2,000 or so, if I wanted to go for more premium glass. The big difference you're going to see in some of those more higher end scopes and better glass is actually the light collection. Because I do think the Chinese glass has gotten so good that during daylight conditions, like you can do a lot of work with cheap glass, which is awesome for the industry. But, you know, don't be a member of the Just As Good Club because it's not just as good. The cheap stuff is getting better, but it is not just as good. So keep that in mind when you're choosing a precision rifle. If you were to try a different caliber, 6.5 PRC is pretty awesome. If you want to go with like kind of a big dog caliber and a Magnum cartridge and a long action, you could look at something like a 300 Win Mag, which is not my favorite because of the belted cartridge, but it's accessible from an ammunition point of view. You could also look at the new Hotness, which is 7 PRC, which I believe it's a standard action, but it has Magnum performance. Basically, it's like a 7mm Magnum on crack with a shorter action, but the ammunition is hard to come by. It's only a year old. There's not a ton of rifles out there that do it well. And then finally, a 300 PRC I know is really, really popular. That's more of like a mile gun. This gun is not really designed to do that. I wouldn't buy that as your first gun. I'd probably stick with 6.5 PRC, 6.5 Creedmoor, or like a 308 even for a rifle designed to do these things. A cool thing that this rifle can do that I kind of have it set up to do is be a bit of like, I guess, a militia or Minuteman sniper. Because I have all my dope put together, I'm really comfortable with this rifle. I can stack them in there, and if I had to grab this thing with my buddies and my assigned role was to do a long distance type of shooter role or reconnaissance, I'd feel pretty comfortable with using this rifle. The big drawback would be that feeding issue, right? So if I had to shoot multiple targets, that's going to give me more issue. Not that it can't be done, but it's certainly not what I would want to pick up first, but it can do it, and that's really cool. I think that that's awesome. So wanted to put this together for you guys. I've gotten a bunch of questions about like, how do I take a rifle out to 1,000 yards? A lot of my friends found out that I was doing this kind of thing, and it just seems to be the FUD lore is strong with that type of myth that you can't do it. It's pretty easy. A buddy of mine went to New Mexico with me. I got him on his belly, and the second time he squeezed his shot, he hit a man-sized target about 1,300 with this gun. And he is not a novice shooter, but he's certainly not a guy that, you know, puts more than 1,000 rounds downrange a year, probably half that. And he did it easily, and it was repeatable, right? So it's just understanding your weapon system. And for those of you that want to go take a class on it, I would recommend before you pay somebody for an in-person class, which is always great, go and subscribe to Warrior Poet Society and take Ryan Kleckner's long-range rifle course. It's like, I think it's like $10 a month for Warrior Poet Society or something, and they have just like a wealth of information on there. I went and shot for my first time past 200 yards at 1,300 or so, or 1,275, whatever it was, only after doing the WPS long-range course online. It's on their app. You can do it on your phone or on your TV or whatever. And I just figured out how to do it, understood my data, punched into a ballistic calculator, got some guesstimates, punched in the data into my scope, and I squeezed the trigger. And I've got a video just in the form of a short on the YouTube channel. It's a little bit hard to hear because the target's far enough away and the steel is fairly large, but I did make an impact on my first shot. And by the end of that day, we were shooting, I probably put 200 rounds down range of 6.5 Creedmoor. By the end of that day, I was able to shoot a bowling pin at like 900 yards just about every single time without there being an absurd wind gusting about. So it's pretty cool what you can do with a cheap rifle. By no means am I like some kind of elite PRS, like competition shooter. I obviously don't have any military background either. So it's pretty cool to know some average guy who's into guns, who kind of shoots a lot, can just get out there and be comfortable with shooting targets at 1,000 yards plus. And man-sized targets are easy. They're not hard to hit somebody in the A zone or even just the C zone. Pretty easy to do. You can get down on 8 and 10 inch plates with this gun at 1,000 plus. It's just not a problem. So hopefully that's helpful to you guys if you're trying to decide if you want to get into a bolt gun. I shot a couple hogs with it last year at like 300 yards. I shot one of them through the snout and dropped him. Shot the other one in the eyeball and dropped them both. I mean, they didn't even twitch. They were about 120 and 150 pound sows each. So they weren't small pigs, but they weren't huge. 6.5 Creedmoor with just like a Hornady Hunter round, sat him right down. And I mean, I was actually hunting with a client. He saw it. He thought it was incredible, which is, again, kind of another testament to the FUD lore. He's like, oh my gosh, it's at 300 yards. Like, dang, what are you, some kind of sniper? And it's like, if only he knew that doing this stuff is not very hard. If you understand the data and you understand your weapon system, it's just not tough. So with that, guys, God bless you. Stay prepared. Have a wonderful week. And if you're watching this, I hope you got something out of it. If you've got any questions, feel free to like, subscribe, comment. I'm just doing this YouTube channel because I enjoy getting this data out to people. And to be honest, I just refer my friends to watch the video of whatever the topic may be. So if you have any other content you want me to cover, I'm happy to do it. So again, this is Will from Civitac. Appreciate you stopping by.